There's an old saying that the best way to get to know a person is to look through their record collection. Well, that would take days or even weeks, so I'm going to give you a shortcut, but I'm even going to go a step further. Not only whittle it down to albums, but my actual favorite songs on this episode of Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, a small chain of independent record shops in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're not local, but you are in the U.S., you can shop online at ntxvinyl.com and would love it if you'd subscribe to our channel here on YouTube and follow us across social media on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. The handle is at NTX Vinyl. Can you name your absolute favorite songs? This is not easy at all. I have really tried my best here. There are, I would say, 3 or 4 that I've always kind of gravitated towards over, I don't know, basically my adult life as far as my favorite songs, and I've been able to point to those, and those are on this list. But fleshing out a top 10 was really, really difficult. And just like any one of these lists, if you ask me today versus tomorrow, it could change. But I'll tell you, these ones on here, they're here for a reason, and I'm going to kind of go through. From a criteria standpoint, I tried to think outside the box in regards to genre, era, but the reality is your favorites are your favorites. And I wasn't going to like shove one in here just to have a country track or just to have an R&B track or just to have a track from the last few years versus stuff that's older. Like, I just tried to basically think, what are the songs that year after year, time after hundreds or thousands of listens still give me goosebumps and that I still enjoy no matter how many times I've heard them. That's the criteria. Let's go. All right, these are in no particular order. I literally am just pulling them off the list. I put 10, which is hard enough. There's no way I was putting them in order, right? So first one on the list, Then As It Was, Then Again It Will Be, and though the course may change sometimes, rivers always reach the sea. That is a line from the greatness of 10 Years Gone, from one of my favorites by Led Zeppelin, of course. All of these songs are existing on albums, which I've featured in so many videos, and rightfully so, because it contains, my favorite songs, but a lot of the entire albums are some of my favorite albums of all times as well. But 10 Years Gone in particular has always spoke to me. It represents that perfect blend of Zeppelin to me. You've got the screaming electric guitars mixed beautifully with acoustics and with mandolin. You've got a soaring vocal. The track's, I think, over 6 minutes long, which is perfect for Zeppelin because I love when they write those kind of grandiose, epic type of songs. And this is one of those. I think it gets overlooked because of a song like Stairway to Heaven. This is very much in that same vein. Achilles' Last Stand is another one that comes to mind that kind of gets overlooked as far as great Zeppelin tunes. In that way, there's also great Zeppelin tunes like Ramble On and, Rock and Roll, which are great punchy 3-4 minute songs. But as far as the kind of the opus type of songs that Page and Plant would write, 10 Years Gone is at the top of that list for me. Melody, instrumentation, a really, really unique arrangement. I mean, it takes a couple of minutes before you even get into vocals and then into drums. And the guitars, like, I'm a guitar player, so for me, a lot of these are rooted in guitar because I love to actually play them myself. And that's a big reason why some of these stick with me, is because when you know the song in depth as far as how it's actually constructed, you see how unique it is, how interesting it is, maybe how difficult it is. That adds a lot to my opinions as far as what I consider my favorites. And this is truly one of those, from the opening note all the way through. all of the journey it takes you on. That's exactly the way I would describe this song. It's a journey, along with a lot of other Zeppelin songs that are in this vein. It's just there's a subtleness to it, but then some of the guitar licks, the guitar solos are absolutely just peak Plant, and I absolutely love that. He's probably my favorite guitar player ever from a writing perspective and performing perspective. You can look up them performing 10 Years Gone live, and he plays a triple neck guitar with 6-string, 12-string, and mandolin in an attempt to pull off a version that replicates what they did on Physical Graffiti. So it's again, it's one of my favorites. I thought it was a great one to just kick off this list. It's definitely one of those, when I started thinking about this list, that I knew this one from the very beginning was already going to be on there. So I didn't have to hunt for this one. Zeppelin was a band I immediately started thinking of, and 10 Years Gone is always at the top of that list. So if you don't know 10 Years Gone, you don't know Physical Graffiti, please fix that. An absolute gem of an album and a beautiful song that kicks off my top 10. Next on the list is a deep track. Maybe like a 10 Years Gone, not a big single. There are some of those on this list, some kind of no-brainers, and when I get to them, you'll know. This is one that is on an album I talk about often. That is Amorca by the Black Crowes, and one of my favorite songs ever is the closing track called Descending. But I would let it slide like mercury, silver and quick, poisonous and deadly, so deadly. There's a couple of threads that will run through this list. One, there's a number of songs lyrically that are rooted in substance abuse, unfortunately. The other thing that I noticed while listening back to some of these and forming this list is that I'm a sucker for a rock piano ballad. And that's where Descending comes in as the first one on this list. It is a beautifully constructed song on one of my favorite albums of all time, honestly. Amorica is a gem in itself, and Descending is a track that, for me, is the perfect closer because it takes you, again, that word journey. This album definitely takes you on that, and I think Descending is the perfect end cap for it. I have had the opportunity to see him perform it live, I think just once, and that was an absolute treat. It's one of those, because of the kind of grand piano intro and the way the steel guitar kind of slips in. It's got a great vibe to it, and it sounds fantastic. It feels like you're in the room. I don't know if it was all tracked and recorded live or not, but it certainly has that vibe. And coming back, to when this was released into the early 90s, like it could have been and probably was. Just a beautiful track from a band that has a wide range of influences and has kind of morphed their style over the years, going back to the beginning when they were, straight up kind of Southern rock, straightforward rock band, and they kind of evolved and got into some more psychedelic stuff, and which is represented on this album and on Three Snakes. And then it kind of later into their career, they got into almost like a Grateful Dead type thing, to where they were more jam band based. But going back to Amorica and Descending, it's just, again, one of those tracks that's always spoken to me. I can put it on, and the minute that piano kicks in, the hair stands up on my arms. That's just what it does for me. I don't know why. I can't explain it. I'm sure you have songs that do the exact same thing for you, but give Descending a listen if you don't know it, and see if it has that same effect on you. It always has on me. Since the moment this album came out, that's always been my favorite song, and it has stuck with me all these years. And it was an easy choice for this list, and I'm glad the Crowes made it, because if I was stuck with listening to these songs forever, I would not complain to have to listen to Descending for the rest of my life. Like I mentioned, there are certain songs that were absolute no-brainers, some deep album cuts, and there were also some that are quite obvious, at least to me. And one of those is Imagine by John Lennon. It's a song that I could not have on this list. And another piano ballad, which, again, there's several on this list, as you'll see, which I found very, very interesting for some reason. The songs that incorporate not only piano throughout, but especially a really unique and just beautiful piano intro always seem to grab me. So Imagine's no different. I don't think I need to tell you about Imagine and what John Lennon was trying to convey with this track. It's truly a classic song. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will live as one. Grandiose visions from Lennon, which is what he was all about as he in his post Beatle days. I love the Plastic Ono Band, which was his first post Beatles release, and then he comes out with Imagine, which as an album I think is fantastic, obviously, but as a track, I don't think there's an album, there's a song that represents John Lennon more. I don't think that's really disputable. It is tied to his legacy. It is tied to the brand of what John Lennon is and who he was and what his thoughts were and what he was trying to do with his music. I think that's the other thing that is so great about a song like this, is he was actually making an attempt to make a statement and change the world. Like, really? Can you do that with a song? Well, he thought you could, and he gave it his best damn shot. And to this day, I appreciate that. I love going to New York. I love going to Strawberry Fields and seeing the Imagine Memorial right there across in the Dakota. It's a thing that I'll always cherish, even though it was well before my time. And this song and the simplicity of it, the simplicity of the instrumentation and the melody paired with the message, make it one of my absolute favorites, without a doubt. While we're thinking about the Beatles, I look at the world and I notice it's turning while my guitar gently weeps. Even though I had a John Lennon on here, I could not have a Beatles song. And in this case, While My Guitar Gently Weeps is my choice. A George Harrison song. McCartney did make the list, which is interesting and sad, honestly, but that's how hard it is to make one of these lists. The White Album is probably my favorite Beatles record if I was forced to pick one. And if I was forced to pick a favorite song, as I am forcing myself to do right now, While My Guitar Gently Weeps is that track. Harrison wrote this song when the band came back from their trip to India, where they were kind of off on a vacay, if you will. He came back from the sitar to the acoustic guitar, wrote this track, brought it to the band. Infamously, the band wasn't all that into it, but this is the White Album, so they were all at odds. And he ended up, because of that, bringing Eric Clapton in to play lead on this track on While My Guitar Gently Weeps, which is a bonus and something that I love. It's a really unique aspect. There weren't a lot of guest players on a lot of Beatles songs, other than Billy Preston at the very end, and some session players throughout. But most of the Beatles tracks, it's the four of those guys, which is what's fabulous about it. But While My Guitar Gently Weeps, just again, it speaks to me. It's a beautiful acoustic track with a fantastic melody, fantastic hook, great arrangement. It's recorded really well, and it represents to me the best of what this band was towards the end of their career, when they were kind of imploding during this album, but they could still pump out a song like this that could make it on a list like this, regardless of where they were at. And that just speaks to how talented they were. But again, I don't need to tell you this. If you're a Beatles fan, you understand that. And if you're not, then that's fine too. But While My Guitar Gently Weeps is one of probably 4 or 5 Beatles tracks that I was considering. And it's not easy to whittle it down and go, oh, no, this one's a little better than that one. So I just had to give it the test and be like, put it on headphones and just which one grabs me the most today. Again, it may be different tomorrow, but While My Guitar Gently Weeps by the great George Harrison made the list. Similar to choosing a favorite Beatles song for this list, it was equally as hard for me to choose a favorite U2 song. But if I was forced to choose, the song Bad from The Unforgettable Fire would be my number one choice. It is another song that unfortunately is centered around drug addiction. If you twist and turn away, if you tear yourself in two again, if I could, yes, I would. Let it go, surrender, and dislocate. It's a sad song, honestly, but it's a really interesting song from an arrangement and from a from a songwriting standpoint, it doesn't really have a structure and a chorus. It is all based around a singular riff by The Edge. And then Bono adds the story on top of that, and it's a meandering song. The most famous version, there's a couple famous versions. Number one is the Live Aid version, where they perform this and Bono goes into the crowd with the long mullet. It's hilarious to watch these days, but it's a fantastic performance at Wembley. And then the other famous version is the live version they recorded at Red Rocks, which is on the Blood Red Sky EP. So those are fantastic. My favorite version, though, is on the box set for All That You Can't Leave Behind. The only way to get it on vinyl is in that box set, and it was recorded during the All That You Can't Leave Behind tour, the Elevation tour, and it was the Live in Boston DVD that they also pressed to vinyl. That version, which also has a tag of the song 40 in it, just rips me apart. I absolutely love it. I have had the opportunity to see Bad performed live many times because it's a live staple for the band to this day, as it should be. And again, it's just the goosebump test. When the needle hits Bad, or when I skip to the song Bad, if I'm listening digitally, and that guitar riff enters with that echo that Edge is so known for, it's the perfect representation of U2 for me. This isn't my favorite U2 album. In fact, this probably isn't even my top 5 favorite U2 albums. But the song stands on its own. I love all the different iterations they've done over the years. They have a brand new acoustic kind of bass version they did on the Songs of Surrender, which I love to hear as well, where Bono actually updates some of the lyrics. Again, I think that's fascinating that they would go back and do that, and really cool to hear. So love the track. I love how unique it is. And for me, if I'm going to represent U2 on this list, which I had to, that would be the song that would do it for me. Next on the list, another one that I think is blatantly obvious. It's a song that from the moment I heard it, I've always loved it, and that is the title track to Pink Floyd's Wish You Were Here. I would say next to Imagine and probably While My Guitar Gently Weeps, probably the most famous songs on this list. The biggest hits, the ones that you still hear on, popular radio today. But I don't care. Like, I still love it. It doesn't matter to me that it's a very well-known song. It's a song that is one of the first songs I ever learned how to play on guitar, that I still remember to this day. And it's not a difficult song, but believe me, it's hard for songs to stick with you that long when you don't play that often anymore. But I love Wish You Were Here. I love the guitar work on it. Again, I love the kind of fuzzed out radio fade in intro. I always thought that was the coolest thing, especially when you hear it on the radio and it takes that long build to get to the actual guitars coming in. I love that. And that's just so Pink Floyd, right? It's just a perfectly written song to me. It's written with a heartfelt message from Roger Waters about his former bandmate, Syd Barrett, about how he wishes he was still with them. And it's an anchor point on an album that is a beautiful album in its own right. I think it's a great example of what a rock song should be. I feel like people could teach a class with a song like Wish You Were Here, and I'm sure people do when it comes to songwriting and instrumentation and arrangement. It's a simple song, a simple message, but it's absolutely beautiful. Next on the list, yet another piano ballad, at least piano-based intro ballad. This is Mother Love Bone, and the song is kind of a two-part song, and that is Chloe Dancer, Crown of Thorns. There is so much history with this band and how they set up what was to come with the explosion of rock music in the early 90s. I did not hear of this song, Chloe Dancer / Crown of Thorns, on this album, though. Like most kids in the 90s, I heard about it on the Singles soundtrack because that's where Cameron Crowe put it to expose people to the band. So at the time, Nirvana, and Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, all these bands were hitting, and so few people like myself knew that there was a band before all that, you know, again, in the mainstream. I'm down in Dallas and I'm 13 when Mother Love Bone's hitting up in Seattle, 12, 13 years old. So like I had no visibility into that, right? So for me, when the single soundtrack drops and I hear this kind of crescendo of a track in the middle of that album that's piano based, and you know it's got like almost a Guns N' Roses like November Rain type vibe going on, that type of thing, but also like an Elton John thing, but it's very rock. Like it was very eye-opening at the time and very different. You know, put it next to Soundgarden's you know, Birth Ritual on here, or the Screaming Trees, or the Pearl Jam tracks, whatever it may be, or next to the Jimi Hendrix, like, and it's a complete standout. So when that happens on singles, that's the moment for me when I go back and I say, okay, who is Mother Love Bone? And of course, right away you figure out that, oh, this was the seedlings of Pearl Jam, and you figure out the history and how it happened, and what went down and the timeline behind it. So for me, not only do I love Chloe Dancer, Crown of Thorns, because I love the instrumentation, and again, another song about drug addiction, unfortunately, on some level, but the story and what that song represents as far as being, to me, kind of a transitional tune. I can listen to that song, and of course, Pearl Jam plays that song, you know, in their live set and have for years. It took them 20 years, I think, to play it, but they've kept it in their set, thankfully. It's the transitional song to me where I can hear some of where Jeff and Stone were going with that track and how it transitioned into songs like Black, you know? So not only is it one of my favorite songs ever, but it represents the birth of one of my favorite bands ever. And of course, that is Pearl Jam, and we'll talk about them next. So just like the Beatles or Pink Floyd or Led Zeppelin, it's not easy to determine a favorite track of one of your favorite artists. In fact, it's incredibly difficult. But for me, for many years, I have always said when someone says, what's your favorite Pearl Jam song? I have a singular answer, and I do not stutter in my response. And that response is the song Present Tense off the album No Code. It is an epic song written by Mike McCready and Eddie Vedder that is the perfect crescendo to me in their live set. It is, I love the studio version because obviously that's where it's kind of rooted in. The live version is got a lot more meat behind it, honestly, but the studio version with the kind of more subtle guitar, beautiful guitar line, like just so unique. Again, another one that sticks with me because I've learned how to play it over the years, and it's very unique. And the build that happens during this song and then that crescendo towards the end, it just gets me every time. And it's, again, one of those songs for me that represents something. It's not only one of my favorite songs when I listen to it because of what I hear, but because of what it means to me and the time and the place and the memory, and for where the band was in their career. Like, I've talked about this album a lot, but you know, this is the transitional album when so many people stopped listening to Pearl Jam, and Pearl Jam stopped caring at that point and started just doing their own thing and being a band, because that was really their only option. Like, you can read and watch interviews about how they were like on the cusp of pretty much imploding and breaking up around the time of Vitology and No Code. They switched drummers. Jack Irons joins the band, brings in a completely different energy, and No Code is what came out of that. And they weren't doing videos, they weren't doing press, they had attempted to stop touring in major venues. So they were still very much the biggest band in the world at this time, but they had started to retreat on all levels from the mainstream kind of spotlight. And I loved that. I loved that they were in it for the long haul and they were saving themselves. If they would have continued to do all of those things, videos and radio and big tours, they would have broke up. Like, they knew that they had to essentially go into a shell in order to survive. So for me, Present Tense represents all of that. It's about it making much more sense to live in the present tense. I love the line. I love the sentiment of the song. I think today, more than any time in my life, is a mantra to live by in a day when we're completely consumed with being connected and videoing everything we see. Kind of funny to say that as I'm shooting a video for you, and as you're watching one on a phone. But the reality is pick your time and place and live in the present tense. And it's something that you should, or I always have to continually remind myself of. So the song represents so much to me. Love the instrumentation, love the vocal, love the lyric. Present Tense by Pearl Jam. Next on the list, another ballad by an artist that, again, was hard to pick a singular track. But it's easy when you can gravitate towards a single album and then kind of nail it down. This is a very similar song to me, like Descending from the Black Crowes, because it's the ending track on an album that represents a time and place in Tom Petty's career where I think he was doing his best work. Go listen to the last track on Wildflowers, which is Wake Up Time. It's a beautiful track with so much feeling. It is one that has always been a highlight for me and is the perfect bookend to what I consider to be Tom's greatest work ever. I love the album through and through. I've loved it since the minute it came out. I love that it revitalized his career. I love the production and what Rick Rubin brought to the table. I love that he stripped away everything and then gradually brought the Heartbreakers back in to create this record. I love that his estate did a wonderful thing by actually doing the work justice and putting together the 3 LP set of what he originally wanted to release and the label rejected, and that they took it even further and did the expanded big box set version, because man, is it a gem. But Wake Up Time, so for me, it's the bookend to the album and the closing thought from Tom on an album when you can tell he was trying to figure out who he was going to be and where he was going to go with his career in the early 90s. And it's just a beautiful song. I love the instrumentation. I love the contribution from all the band members and the production. And it's one of those subtle kind of creeper songs. And again, I think if you ask a lot of people what the top Tom Petty songs are, like, this one's not going to be on there. This is a deep track. It's an album cut, but that doesn't matter to me. It's the ones that resonate with me the most. That's what this list is all about. And that's why Wake Up Time is there. Last but not least is actually the song that starts this list, which is why I ended with it. When people ask you, what's your favorite song? I think most people don't have an answer to that. I've always had one, as long as I can remember being an adult, essentially. And the answer to that question is the song Soup by Blind Melon. And it was only ever released on this album, which is called Nico, not on the album Soup, which was their second full-length album. So that in itself always created some mystery for me. I'm like, how does this song called Soup not end up on the album Soup? Well, you can Google it and find some interviews. And Christopher Thorne, who wrote, I think, the majority of the music for this track, has said that it just didn't fit at the time, which I understand that. There are always songs that get cut from a studio session and don't make it onto the album. That's how B-sides, that's how outtakes end up, getting recorded. And in this case, this was Nico. This is an album that came out after Shannon died, and they pieced together some of those leftover tracks. There's a lot more left on the table as far as demos are concerned, but the fact that a song called Soup ends up on this album after Shannon passes, it confused the hell out of me. I'm like, how did this not end up on the album? And so that was always very interesting to me. Again, going back to guitar, the guitar line in this song always intrigued me. This one, along with Present Tense, are just beautifully written guitar songs. So interesting, so unique. I love playing it. It's got such fluidity to it when you're playing this on guitar. And then you have Shannon's vocals on top of it. They just hit so hard, and I pull the trigger and I make it all go away. Christopher Thorne, who again wrote the music, he has stated that he knows that this was written by Shannon about Kurt, and that was always, I think, something people assumed. I don't know how close they were. They didn't tour. I don't think they toured together, Nirvana and Blind Melon, but everybody in that scene at that time, regardless of whether or not you knew Kurt or not, or whether or not you were just a fan. Everyone was affected, and so was Shannon, and he wrote this song. Again, I think if you can imagine this song being actually included on the Soup album, I think it makes it even stronger, but it wasn't going to be a radio hit type song anyways. It doesn't have a traditional arrangement. Again, I think that's a similar thread through a lot of these. The piano, those are the two things I noticed in this list, or two of the things I noticed, is that the piano ballad, piano intro thing is something I gravitate towards. Songs at the end of albums, like kind of bookend songs. And then also songs with really unique arrangements. Like, I love a good chorus. I love a good hook. But the ability to write a great hook with not even really having a chorus, that's unique. And that's something that takes place on Soup and many of these other songs that I called out. Not all of them, but there's a few of them in there that have that kind of unique element to it. And so Soup's a song that has just always spoke to me. Again, melody, hook, interesting arrangement, and guitar. Like, those are all the things that really get me going, that give me the goosebumps, that get my hair to stand up on my arms, all that feeling, and Soup is one of those. So I absolutely love it. It's definitely, I think, out of all of these songs, probably the least well known. You know, there's Descending by the Black Crowes and Wake Up Time by Petty, those being the last ones on those albums. Maybe those were a little undiscovered, but I think Soup is probably by far the most underrated, unheard song on this list. So I would encourage you to check it out. I love it. I think it's fantastic. Similar to Present Tense, it's got a fantastic crescendo. And if you want to not only hear, but see, in my opinion, the best version of Soup being performed, look up Blind Melon at Woodstock 94. Look at the song Soup. It's beautiful, even in front of that audience, where they had no business playing this really quiet, subtle ballad up until the very end. They still did it, and they pull it off, and it's really, really emotional. You can see it for Shannon, and I just remember seeing that at the time as my introduction to the song, because again, it wasn't on the album. I hadn't seen the band live, so I hadn't seen them perform it. So my first time ever hearing Soup was watching that pay-per-view Woodstock 94 and getting to hear that song. Go, what was that song? Where is that? And then, of course, you know, a couple years later, after Shannon passes, we get it on Nico, and I remember thinking, oh, thank God it came out. Thank God they had it recorded, because at that time you didn't know if it was, you didn't know the name of it even, you didn't know where it came from. So from the moment I heard Soup, it's always been one of my favorites, and it has grown over time, and it's definitely that song where when I get asked the question, what's your number one song ever? Soup is the answer. So that's my list. It's not easy to do this. I would encourage you to give it a shot. It's hard to think big picture and try and think about all the artists you're excluding, all the songs you're excluding. I had a whole list of backups. Oh Sweet Nothing, Sweet Euphoria, Atlantic City, Gimme Shelter, Dear Mr. Fantasy, Born and Raised, Tiny Dancer, China Cat Sunflower. The list goes on and on and on. So many great songs. Most of what I gravitated towards on this list is in the rock genre, but I could easily split it out and go do an R&B or go do a country or even a metal list, which maybe I'll do at some point, but I had to start somewhere. I thought I'd start with the hardest one of all, and that is my top 10 favorite songs ever. Hope you enjoyed it. My name is G.I. We'll see you again next time on another episode of Talking About Records.